Good evening. What if I told you that while most of the world slept, a small capital city in West Africa became the stage for one of the most calculated assassination attempts of our time, an operation so silent, so surgical, that it almost succeeded in erasing a man who has come to represent Africa's new defiance? At 2:30 a.m., Ouagadougou was still. The streets lay under curfew, the night thick with heat and dust. Then the first explosion shattered the silence. Power grids flickered. Communications went dark. Within seconds, the capital of Burkina Faso was under siege, and the target was President Ibrahim Traoré. Witnesses later described what they saw as unreal, unmarked vehicles without headlights, moving in perfect formation, engines low, weapons suppressed. Whoever they were, they came prepared for precision, not chaos. Military sources said the attackers bypassed security checkpoints as though they already knew every pattern of the guard rotations. Within minutes, the country's entire cellular network collapsed. Radio stations went off air. The capital fell into total digital silence. Inside the presidential compound, the elite guards took positions. They say the first wave hit from the west wall, silent bursts, infrared scopes cutting through the darkness. They moved like ghosts, one survivor recalled. The engagement lasted less than 20 minutes. By 3 a.m., the attackers retreated into the night, leaving behind fragments of advanced equipment, tactical drones, encrypted radios, and shell casings with markings no one recognized. What remained was not only the smoke of gunfire, but a question that hung over the entire region. Who wanted Ibrahim Traoré dead, and why now? As dawn broke, the city stood suspended between disbelief and anger. Markets stayed shut, children kept home, soldiers on every corner. The government's first statement was short. A serious security incident has been neutralized. The president is safe. But investigators already knew this was not a simple internal coup. The clues told another story. The recovered devices bore Western serial numbers. The jamming signals traced back to data centers outside Africa, often used by private military contractors and intelligence agencies. Someone had orchestrated a hybrid attack: physical, digital, psychological. No uniformed army, no declared war, only precision and deniability. To understand the motive, one must understand the man. Captain Ibrahim Traoré is not just another African leader. He is, for many, the embodiment of a generation unwilling to inherit submission. Young, fiery, unapologetically nationalistic, he has spoken openly against foreign interference, called for resource independence, and expelled foreign troops long stationed on his soil. For some in the West, that makes him unpredictable. For many across Africa, it makes him hope itself. He is seen as proof that sovereignty is not a dream but a decision, and that makes him a dangerous symbol to the old order. The morning after the attack, the atmosphere in Ouagadougou was eerie. Internet service flickered back, unreliable, like a nervous heartbeat. Taxi drivers refused routes near the palace. Even the sound of a helicopter overhead made people flinch. Rumors spread faster than news. Foreign commandos, local traders, even insiders bought off. Then, late that evening, state television resumed broadcasting. No anthem, no introduction, only the flag behind the president. Traoré stood calm, unflinching. He did not name the perpetrators. He did not shout. He simply said, "Burkina Faso's sovereignty will not be negotiated. We will not bow, and we will not be bought." Those words were not merely a declaration. They were defiance wrapped in discipline. For Western audiences, the speech was a quiet warning. Africa's youth no longer asks permission to lead itself. Abroad, the reaction was swift but cautious. Washington released a brief statement denying any involvement and urging regional stability. Brussels emphasized that NATO respects international law. Paris called for transparency, while its media outlets speculated about internal unrest. Officially, everyone distanced themselves. Unofficially, analysts in London and Berlin whispered about signature tactics, the kind seen in private intelligence operations. Meanwhile, Moscow and Beijing seized the opportunity. Russian outlets called it proof of Western meddling. Chinese diplomats reminded the world that sovereignty must be respected in all forms. A landlocked country had suddenly become the center of a global tug of war. Inside Burkina Faso, investigators worked quietly but relentlessly. Several suspects were detained carrying forged passports and encrypted phones. Unverified leaks suggested that data recovered from seized devices connected to European networks and mirrored NATO-style communication patterns. Analysts found evidence of satellite-assisted jamming similar to exercises once conducted in the Sahel under counter-terror operations. The conclusion drawn by many security experts was chilling. This was not just an attempt to eliminate a leader, it was a field test of how power could be projected without footprints. When the smoke finally cleared, nothing inside the government was the same. Communications were restricted, ranks reshuffled, and officials quietly dismissed. Western commentators labeled it a purge. Locals called it cleansing. Across the city, flags multiplied on stalls, on balconies, on military trucks. Hashtags filled the networks. Africa will not kneel. Students lit candles for the soldiers who died defending the compound. Churches and mosques offered joint prayers. Fear slowly transformed into resolve. The price of that unity was heavy. Aid was delayed. Foreign investments froze. Humanitarian projects paused. The economy trembled. Yet, among ordinary citizens, there was a sense of something new, a pride that could not be imported and would not be sold. They tried to kill him, one vendor said, but they only made us awake. In Western capitals, the story quickly faded beneath larger headlines. But in private meetings, policymakers took note. For decades, the West's presence in Africa was framed as partnership training missions, peacekeeping, aid. But the attempt on Traoré's life forced an uncomfortable reckoning. What happens when a nation decides partnership means equality, not obedience? Think tank reports began circulating under careful titles like Managing African Nationalism. Diplomatic cables spoke of a concerning shift in sovereignty rhetoric. The fear was not one leader. It was contagion, the spread of an idea that Africa could stand on its own terms. Weeks later, Traoré appeared in public again. The bullet holes in the palace walls had been repaired, but not hidden. Standing before his soldiers, he spoke quietly. They tried to bury us, but they forgot we are seeds. That line spread faster than any official decree. For supporters, he became less a politician and more a symbol proof that defiance can survive fire. For critics abroad, he became a problem, young, unpredictable, and unwilling to conform. But to many watching history unfold, he became something rarer, the sign that a continent once divided by colonial borders was beginning to write its own narrative. The world will likely never know who ordered the attack. Intelligence files will remain sealed, reports redacted, and officials will repeat phrases like stability and dialogue. Yet beneath all the formalities lies an undeniable truth. Someone, somewhere, fears an Africa that governs itself. Because if one small landlocked nation can resist external control and survive, others might follow. And that, more than any bullet, is what truly terrifies the architects of the old order. For audiences watching from the United States, the United Kingdom, or France, this story may sound distant, but its message is not. It reminds us that influence always has consequences, that the pursuit of stability abroad often masks a fear of independence elsewhere. Burkina Faso's struggle is not just a regional crisis, it is a reflection of how far nations will go to protect the illusion of control. In the quiet hours of that October night, the attack failed. But in failing, it revealed something larger. A world where small nations are learning to say no, even when no one expects them to survive the answer. The line between peacekeeping and powerkeeping has never been thinner. They tried to kill a man, instead they awakened a movement. And somewhere between the blackout and the first light of dawn, a realization was born that sovereignty is not a gift granted by treaties or aid. It is defended in silence, in courage, and in the refusal to bow. When you next hear of instability in the Sahel, remember that night in Ouagadougou. Remember that in the shadow of explosions, a young leader stood and spoke 11 words that could echo across generations. We will not bow, and we will not be bought. Because sometimes, history doesn't happen in broad daylight. It hides in the dark, waiting for those who dare to strike the match. So stay aware, stay curious, and remember, some revolutions do not begin with crowds or slogans. They begin when one nation decides that the time for permission is over.